My name is Yaraslau. I'm a game developer and I'm a game researcher. I have been developing games since 1996. Started in the United States, narrative designer, game designer. I was CEO of some game dev companies and worked with a lot of different people, a lot of companies throughout the world. And at the same time, uh, I was researching games, co-authoring some books with some present on honorable guests. Thank you very much for those opportunities. And as well, working on researching not only video games, but working on like live action role playing games, tabletop games, and so on. It I'm also the head of Belarusian Game Developers Association and former regional coordinator for uh, Eastern Europe and Asia of International Game Developers Association. Uh, that's that's like short for it. But for this topic, uh, I would like to talk about like qualifications which I will use, what insights I had and experienced. It's my checklist of what personally why I agreed to speak on this topic because I worked on historical LARPs, some of them on very disputed topics. So the check. I wrote some historical plays as my first education was a playwright, so in dramaturgy. So this one's checked. I worked on historical video games, and we'll discuss with them. Not very successful from point of view of public shaming video games, which I advised, and that experience taught us even more than successful opportunities. Also, I cooperated with historical communities and associations of victims of concentration camps, which is a very traumatic experience with some other uh, areas and social groups which have traumatic experience. Also, I witnessed historical trauma in Belarus, and I have historical trauma as I passed through some things which I decided not to put into this presentation, like for weak-hearted and very emotional people, not to see some pictures of interrogations, tortures, and results of them, and our prisons in Belarus now. But that bunch of experience, I tried to sum up a little in this 30 or 25 minutes which we have. So I will try to be brief, but uh, though I don't know how, because it's sometimes emotional, um, how well I will be communicating to you the main idea, because thoughts sometimes run around. There's more to say than you are able to say. It's a very interesting topic, and it's wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Mochocki, for organizing uh, this interesting area of discussion during this conference. Okay, one of the theater
Thank you for
drama.
attending.
Thank you. I wrote which is historical dispute. It's about Jan of Arc. Here, as one of previous speakers mentioned, speaking from point of view of different witnesses, it's okay. It's a history. It's the long ago history that there are no witnesses, just some accounts. And the play, the drama was a LARP-ish interactive screen for like bunch of monologues of different characters throughout the life of Jan of Arc, who met her and see her from different points of view, like English soldier, for example, some priest, some cardinal, some king, uh, like a French king, for example, her mother, some lady from the city where she was burned, who just seen her briefly, noble woman, and so on. It's it went quite well, and I wrote it, translated it into English and into French for the anniversary of Joan of Arc. It was taken pretty good. Uh, uh, it was mainly directed to make educative plays for children. So in theaters, they could have monologues and could have some kind of interaction when characters could stand and children would select who to hear. And so it was very demanding on character creation and development. So actors would have something to play, and it would be very different, and characters would be very different from each other for children to see different, to feel different emotions. Also, another thing I also got worked with in International Union of Former Minor Prisoners of Fascist concentration camps, and was awarded the Medal Unconquered for it. A lot of interesting topics, and by the way, some books we wrote, which in the future, if anyone interested, we can discuss. The thing is that my one of my friends, he was one of the survivors, and he was researching concentration camps and the bloodiest ones, and that there are a lot of topics to discuss there. So and in Belarus, we had this finally nation forming, people came out, and I unfortunately, with my activism, was put on the list, which is interesting. They had set up a year and a half ago a list of people called Judas list, where they would put your name, all the personal data, and there's like your address, your email, your everything they could find. So you could bully, and people who get on this Judas list, they can be killed. Anything could be done with them. They're like outlaws in this country, and nothing would happen to the person who beat them up, who bully them, who break their property, who threaten them, insult them, and so on. Also, they now have, through last year, they have actually a TV show called Judas, the Order of Judas, where they they publicly shame. It's like, Minute of Hate from Orwell's 1984. They have actually public shaming and insulting people, new people who are getting in the list of Judas, and I'm on that list twice. So you can imagine how fun was it at the same time. So we've got like no violence from our side at all, and we were like shot at, beaten up, and arrested for like basically like interesting things. So there are a lot of issues in this. So it feeling it from inside helped to understand a lot of moments, and hopefully I will be able to share further on. And it helped also to understand how to work with different games, and why some games get hit and some are not getting hit. Also, at one point I was also consulted the game Cost of Freedom, which actually is very well connected to Poland as well. Cost of Freedom was a game which is at the beginning was set up in Auschwitz concentration camp, and it was actually very well received by game designers, even though when it was announced. But as example, there's some articles by one resource, but actually a lot of media from all over the world started writing about it. Polish death camps in video game trailer investigation, launched official investigation in Auschwitz video game. Ukrainian company was forced to cancel Auschwitz video game amid outcry. The problem was that actually the owners and the creators of the game, it's a small indie studio, Alien Games, they actually at the beginning wanted to show the problem that in their country they are forgetting what Nazism means, and they actually created a game where they wanted for people to feel it, to understand it, to see the horrors of it, to remind about it. It's their like historical moment. And we actually, why I mentioned this association, because this association I brought onto the project to be advisors, which is interesting. People who survived concentration camp were advisors, and still the game got a lot of heat, and the problem is that indeed in the future and investigation has been launched even before the game has been released. So the game has been canceled. In the future, though, we moved we moved location to Russian Gulag type setting and released the game finally. But it wasn't that successful by the people because Russians started giving heat to it, and it was fully independent project. Even though a lot of experts, like game developers with a lot of experience, they seeing a lot of potential in this game, but still it was cancelled by the outcry. And in Poland, a lot of it came from Poland as well. As you can see, official legal action was taken. So this experience is very, very interesting because you could see that the quality of game and some other things are not. There are a lot of sensitive moments in the game, which even with the support of those who survived through it, can make it uh, an international sensation and provoke a big outcry, which not always work. You know, public opinion is fully sometimes, unless legal action is taken locally, which would be difficult because Alien Games is the company from Ukraine, and outcry mainly, as you can see, main legal force was from Poland. It They didn't have the mechanism to stop the game from production, also because it was in the studio. They could just move to the other country and go on. It's not that difficult. They didn't have it registered. It's not stationary, so it was quite difficult for them uh, to be canceled. So it was up to developers themselves, to main game developers, to like project lead on the game, and they decided to pull the plug. And due to respect and their target audience, to those they wanted to hear, they decided to hear them, because it doesn't always work. For example, there is example of Polish developed game Kursk, which was pretty interesting. But for Russians, it was a tragedy. And for us, even, it was a tragedy. I still remember how big of a tragedy it was. It was all over the news. And you can see that Russians did not react really well. And that didn't do anything. Actually, the game still existed. And even though you can see the game didn't have a lot of stuff there, though there's some music and so on, but uh, uh, it was mainly mechanics. There weren't that much narrative in this, but it still provoked the reaction. Not all reactions provoke cancellation of the game. In some countries, for example, here, Times of Israel wrote an article like in 2014 about the game. Actually, the game uh, about concentration camp, with, you see, brutality, with swastikas, with children. I don't know what they are doing there with children, but the major new game, actually set at Nazi concentration camp, is actually become a top seller, and it's Wolfenstein: The New Order. Now, fascinating, but it's also related to all those same things, but it didn't get any hit, even on behalf of having swastika inside of the game, which only in few countries is illegal to have. But sometimes many games, such as Call of Duty, for example, they take off the swastika and change it for just like Iron Cross type symbolism. Uh, so that's very interesting phenomena, social phenomena, that nevertheless it provoked a lot of outrage. It still can be cancelled or not, uh, without a specific noticed like order, without specific possibility of us predicting this or that outcome. Of course, sometimes it's based on on big marketing budget, which can counter a lot of articles with some positive reviews. That's definitely would work, but sometimes some other features would work. And that what actually got me interested, because after coming out from Belarus, I thought to try and organize, to reflect in games some of these, which I will tell you a little later. So is it bad or good that we're not allowing these topics sometimes to be? For example, my friend Sergei Loparev, a game developer from Belarus, for the first LARP writer challenge, which was announced, was won by the game The Police. It's a game where actually you play the Polizei. Polizei is a very bad type of it's like collaborators with Nazis who murdered a lot of people. And during the game, you're actually forced to shoot people, to torture each other, even. They actually really emotionally provoke you. And this game actually won LARP Writer Challenge, which was juried by some of the most politically correct nations, such as Nordic countries, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden were the main jury members there, and so in Finland, of course. And so that is fascinating how some games, which basically suggest the same, because the game Cost of Freedom also would suggest you to become Nazi. You could become like one of the prisoners or the Nazi, and you play against each other. But there, as a Nazi, you have to do some things which you don't want to, or you can sometimes not do that. You have to feel that you don't want to do it. Same thing as here in live action role playing, indeed, as well, but it was taking more positive and even won the first prize and was translated to many languages, uh, which is interesting phenomena, isn't it? So studying the subject further, there were a lot of games about like concentration camps, and one of them, KZ Manager, and KZ Manager became like the name of those games about concentration camp, because KZ is abbreviation, German abbreviation for it. So as it states in this New York Times article, that KZ they actually published the research in 1991. In 1991, there were already 140 games, 140 games about concentration camps, and already 39% of percent, like the students in one of the city found 39% knew of the games. So it was so popular that 39% of all the students knew about the game, and 22% had encountered the games. So 1/5 of students of the country, and that's actually a lot. So this thing closer to the event itself, closer 21 1991, sorry, it was closer to the event itself. It was closer to World War II. So it was 30 years ago, and these games were more easy accepted by the community for some reason, and even were becoming popular, not because they're of negative, but because people actually played them. 140. But still, is it a good or bad thing when we ban some topic entirely? Some games, as in this article by Catherine Brodsky, she, nice last name, by the way, she actually wrote in Wired this year that some games such as Call of Duty, Battlefield, sanitize history entirely by removing all traces of Nazi Germany, despite being set in during World War II. So the restriction, and by the way, that problem has been mentioned by previous speakers, if I recall correctly, and interesting that restrictions actually force games to avoid any problem, basically stripping historical data of any evidence of what actually happened. So we're basically hiding all the scary things. But is it good or not? if people will play World War II, and they actually in battlefield can play Germans killing other soldiers, and they can win the game. They actually there's no like philosophical ending. They can win the game. They can promote the game. They can ally with Japanese and break through the alliance and defeat them all. So that's actually quite strange that this game becomes very popular. What has to be stripped? So basically, they hidden the truth, which usually does propaganda, and the game becomes popular, and no problem with that. So the next question: are the restrictions which are imposed correct? Should they be imposed like that, just banning the topic, or some sensitive data about it, or should they just go for historical accurateness? Even should the game be very emotional? Should it have concentration camp and ordering people to gas chambers, or should it just be nice, like Nazi playing ping pong with the prisoner and or something like that? Would it pass then cost of freedom if it would be without any harsh reality reflected from testimonies of actual victims? That's interesting open question. Uh, in Belarus, we had a lot of problem. We had people killed, and this, for example, a picture of one artist who actually was killed just because he walked out to protect the flag, which was hanged on in front of his house, and people in masks beat him up, and because he was protecting red, white flag, which was put out by people who lived there, people who came into this neighborhood, they just beat him up to death. One of the thing which principle of Belarusian revolution was not forgiving, unforgiving, unforgetting. Why? The problem is that it's actually a spiral election. We had the same repression every election. Just this time we got more opportunity to create more documents and record, register testimonies, and so on. So we understand that propaganda and actually uses and manipulates our emotions and our psychological mechanisms to force us to forget certain incredible traumatizing experience, which they want us to forget so we would live. Why is it happening? Because people actually they have psychological mechanism of defense in case of trauma, and those psychological defense are numerous. They actually are a bit broken in 4 groups: pathological, immature, neurotic, and look how many of them. Most of them actually force you to behave as nothing happened, to reject it, to blame someone else, but basically to somehow retain comfort zone with lies, fantasy, pretense, and only how many. And they usually work when you don't control rehabilitation of post-traumatic syndromes. So if you don't do this professionally, then it just goes somewhere. If you don't reflect it, if you don't treat it, then it damages the person, and all people, like for example from Belarus, they're actually psychologically damaged people. They all need medical care, but only few, only so many psychological mechanisms of protection, of defense, actually positive. So, and they come in a group called mature. So altruism, anticipation, humor, sublimation, and suppression. Others actually traumatize you and make you socially unacceptable because you contradict realism. You can live in a society with those who use the same mechanism and reject reality. But if you move someone, you can't cooperate or coexist with the people. This is why it's important to organize sometimes a real proper work. And for that, you should not forget and forgive. You should not You should not somehow get rid of a negative experience. You have to process it. You have to digest it. And but it's difficult with the more traumatized experience you live through, the more difficult it is. I know I was diagnosed with post-traumatic syndrome, and I will live through it, and it's very interesting for a researcher and narrativist to look through it. And it's very interesting how you feel it inside, how you feel during the traumatic experience, how your body reacts. It's very physical. It's not something, yes, for example, I'm conscious of it. I'm also a master of psychology. I worked with emergency psychiatrical aid for 6 years, and I have some practical experience. I am conscious of it, but still, it's like being conscious of the damaged food. It still doesn't work. You have to treat it. But the problem is that it's hidden inside, and without professional help, you cannot operate on yourself without special training, or without being mentored by professional. So that's interesting moment, that even though with people who are screaming now about trauma, about historical trauma and so on, they actually break this problem into the wrong area. Like Spencer's theory, like biological theory of the state, for which states that actually every biological trait that actually is normal for any person and manifests itself in any person, also sometimes reflects upon society on a bigger scale. So basically, what we see here is the social reactions, which also could work on the scale of the nation, of the whole country, of a lot of people. And without being treated properly by professional, just rejecting the problem and hiding it, it will not help. People will leave it through and through again, just like us. This is why one of the credo of this revolution is unforgiving and unforgetting. So after coming out of this whole situation, one of the idea was to try to create something to document it. And also a lot of game developers from Belarusian Game Developers Association, which was run by my team, were actually damaged. They were imprisoned. They were wounded by shrapnel, beat up, and so on and so on. So as we speak, some of them in prison, and were put to prison for ridiculous, for ridiculous reasons. For example, for having a wrong color of paper snowflakes on the window, or for just walking through a wrong time, or liking a wrong message, or being subscribed to a wrong Telegram channel. So that's kind of ridiculous. And some of them actually were arrested for Polish flags, for even were suspected for even having contract with attorney, was considered to be a proof of conscious readiness to do misconduct, because he's already signing contract with attorney. It means that in the future he's expected to break the law and be called to the court. So the state, even this fact of just a normal contract with attorney for the future. So in the future there would be a number for people to call and work out. Already that is a proof of person having a motive, proving that he had been planning misconduct. That's just illogically, but so we need to learn. So interesting. There is an article in Los Angeles Times, which I actually advise you all to check out. It's quite interesting. The author finds Holocaust children used games to play out their fear. That's very interesting. It's one thing which sets out the basics for us, that games actually can help you to play out, to work out traumatizing experience, and we don't have to turn to psychodrama, which is well known, or interactive theater, theater of the oppressed, which also are well known to help people to live through traumatic past. But already games, as they are, already have been used by no other, like children who survived Holocaust, which is a very interesting and symbolic moment, which could help you to promote a game. So, and after all that study, I decided that we should try to do, with CEO of Global Game Jam, we decided to organize a global game jam based on the topic of Belarusian political situation, to play it out. And there are a few reasons why we decided to do it. Of course, one is game design and the therapy. Not many people think that actually any art is a therapy, and game design is also art, and game design is also one of the most developing activities there actually is in this world, because it has a lot of processes included in it. And interesting that it could be a therapy. So game designers, game developers of my country, they also, and me as well, we want to develop game about what happened to us, to reflect it somehow, building awareness, also to show people what's going on, because a lot of media is getting tired of this info points and they turn to something else, and people also using those mechanisms to push away unpleasant thoughts, so they forgetting, and we need constantly reminding them that we need help, that such things happen and has been happening for almost 30 years, and so on and so on. Also evolving, we need to evolve as people, we need to as community, we need to evolve as community of game developers, developing games about it. We also want others to learn from lessons of Belarus. So that probably work in progress name of Game Jam, Lessons of Belarus. Of and preservation, we need somehow to keep situation and keep emotional imprint of what was going on, so people who have lived through it, they can leave that imprint in games, because games are new media. There used to be movies, there used to be books, art, music, everything, but also games, and they can preserve what has been happening here and there, which also a good function, giving the voice. Game developers are very undermined as political voice, even though games which we create are played by millions of people worldwide, billions of people. We can, if we promote some games, we can actually achieve a good awareness and make game developers being heard. So we also want to prove, because in Belarus they were really suppressed. The internet fully was stopped. They just could care less about game developers, and it doesn't sound. Only a few years ago, game development become actually acknowledged as respectable trade. People I wouldn't put on resume for a law firm or someone as that I'm actually in games, or for some business school or whatever, because only foreign companies would understand how much it meant. But in Belarus, they wouldn't understand. They would think that it's just some fun, some leisure, which usually paid more than any activity within the country for me. So giving the voice to game developers also very important. It would be like a symbol of that game developers together the community can be heard. Ethical education for children. You have in Poland also games about concentration camps and so on. Ethical education about negative experience is also very important, and children would play it and learn about what happened, just like games about the past. After playing Battlefield, they wouldn't understand that World War II actually is a terrible game. No, they wouldn't. It would be for them something strange. In uh, in Medal of Honor, maybe they will understand some of it, but still, it's not that realistic. It's still very uh, like adjusted, and but we can have those games, but also we need to have some of them educative, just like Charles Games Company does, the studio does, that they actually some of the emotions like full scale of emotions need to be also preserved, and people of course need to have a choice to play them or not, but not, and of course to create some political pressure of those who actually will behave doing similar things in the future, so they wouldn't. Oh, I'm sorry, I see that I'm over my time. There's some other things I wanted to share, but maybe next time. Thank you very much, and maybe in dialogue or a chat. Thank you for your attention.